The Harmon family had always loved their secluded farmhouse. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forest in rural Montana, the property had been in James Harmon's family for 3 generations. The isolation that had once seemed so charming to Sarah when she married James 15 years ago now felt oppressive as the autumn winds howled outside their windows. Their children, Emma, 13, and Tyler, 10, had grown accustomed to the sounds of the wilderness, the hooting of owls, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustling of deer through the underbrush. But tonight, something was different. The animals were silent. An unnatural stillness had fallen over the land as darkness crept across the sky. James stood at the kitchen window, staring out at their property. 5 acres of farmland surrounded by forest that stretched for miles. His weathered hands gripped a mug of coffee gone cold, his eyes scanning the tree line. "You've been standing there for 20 minutes, Sarah said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong?" "Something doesn't feel right," James muttered, his voice low. "The livestock are agitated. Chickens wouldn't come out of their co-op this evening. Even Rex is on edge." As if on cue, their German shepherd raised his head from his bed in the corner, ears perked forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Probably just a coyote or something," Sarah reasoned, though uncertainty crept into her voice. "Come on, dinner's ready." The family gathered around their wooden dining table, the warm light from the overhead fixture casting long shadows across the room. Emma picked at her food while Tyler chatted excitedly about a science project. James remained silent, occasionally glancing toward the windows where darkness pressed against the glass. The scratching began halfway through dinner. Faint at first, like fingernails against the side of the house. Sarah and James exchanged glances. "Probably just a branch," Sarah said, but her voice wavered. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. Rex leapt to his feet, barking furiously at the back door. "Dad!" Emma's voice trembled. James rose slowly from his chair. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice firm. He moved to the gun cabinet in the living room, unlocking it and retrieving his hunting rifle. Sarah pulled the children close as James checked that the weapon was loaded. "James, be careful," Sarah whispered. He nodded grimly, moving toward the back door where Rex continued his frenzied barking. James flipped on the porch light and peered through the window beside the door. Nothing but darkness greeted him. With a deep breath, he unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. The autumn air hit him with unexpected force, carrying with it unfamiliar scents, wild, primal smells that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. "Hello," he called out, voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Is someone there?" Only the wind answered, rustling through the dried corn stalks in the nearby field. James took another step forward, scanning the yard. The security light illuminated the immediate area around the house, but beyond that lay impenetrable darkness. A movement caught his eye, something large shifting at the edge of the light. James raised his rifle, finger hovering near the trigger. "Show yourself," he demanded. The creature emerged slowly from the shadows. James expected a bear, perhaps a mountain lion, but what stepped into the light defied explanation. It stood on 2 legs like a man but moved with an animal's predatory grace. Its body was covered in dark fur, its face elongated into something between human and wolf. Umber eyes reflected the security light, fixed on James with terrifying intelligence. For one frozen moment, man and beast regarded each other. Then the creature lunged forward with impossible speed. James barely had time to fire a shot before the creature was upon him. The rifle discharged into the night sky as James was knocked backward, the beast's weight driving him to the ground. He felt hot breath on his face, so gleaming teeth inches from his throat. With desperate strength, he jammed the rifle crosswise into the creature's mouth, keeping those savage jaws at bay. The creature emerged slowly from the shadows. James expected a bear, perhaps a mountain lion, but what stepped into the light defied explanation. It stood on two legs like a man but moved with an animal's predatory grace. Its body was covered in dark fur, its face elongated into something between human and wolf. Umber eyes reflected the security light, fixed on James with terrifying intelligence. For one frozen moment, man and beast regarded each other. Then the creature lunged forward with impossible speed. James barely had time to fire a shot before the creature was upon him. The rifle discharged into the night sky as James was knocked backward, the beast's weight driving him to the ground. He felt hot breath on his face, so gleaming teeth inches from his throat. With desperate strength, he jammed the rifle crosswise into the creature's mouth, keeping those savage jaws at bay. Inside, Sarah heard the gunshot and James's scream. "Stay here," she ordered the terrified children, grabbing the shotgun they kept above the refrigerator. Her hands shook as she loaded it, rakes barking frantically at her side. On the porch, James fought for his life. The creature's claws tore through his jacket, raking his chest. Pain exploded across his body, but adrenaline kept him fighting. He managed to get a knee up between himself and the beast, creating enough space to wrench the rifle free and slam the butt into the creature's head. The blow stunned the beast momentarily. James scrambled backward, raising his rifle again, but the creature was too fast. It swatted the weapon away with one massive paw, sending it clattering across the porch. James looked into those umber eyes and knew he was going to die. The shotgun blast was deafening. The creature howled in pain as buckshot tore into its shoulder. It whirled to face Sarah, who stood in the doorway, rakes snarling at her side. She pumped the shotgun and fired again, but the second shot went wide as the beast leapt from the porch into the darkness. "James!" Sarah rushed to her husband, who lay bleeding on the wooden planks. His chest was a mess of deep lacerations, his clothes soaked with blood. "Oh God, James! Get inside!" he gasped, struggling to his feet with her help. They stumbled into the house, rakes following, hackles raised as he continued to growl at the night. Sarah slammed the door shut, locking it. "Mom!" Emma stood in the hallway, holding Tyler's hand. Both children's eyes widened in horror at the sight of their father's wounds. "Call 911. Sarah ordered, helping James to the couch. Emma ran for the phone while Sarah tore open James's shirt to examine the damage. 4 deep gashes ran diagonally across his chest, bleeding profusely. Sarah pressed a clean towel against the wounds, trying to slow the bleeding. "What was it?" she whispered, her face pale with fear. James's eyes met hers, filled with confusion and terror. "I don't know," he managed. "Not human." Emma returned, her face ashen. "The phone's dead," she said. "And I can't get any signal on my cell." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. The hospital, nearly 30. The car, James groaned. "We need to." A tremendous crash from the back of the house cut him off. Glass shattered as something large broke through the kitchen window. Rex bolted toward the sound, barking furiously. "Rex, no!" Sarah cried, but it was too late. The barking turned to yelping, then silence. "Basement," James gasped, struggling to sit up despite his injuries. "Get to the basement. Now!" Sarah helped James to his feet while Emma guided Tyler toward the basement door. The family descended the wooden stairs just as they heard heavy footsteps moving through their kitchen. Sarah locked the basement door behind them, knowing it wouldn't hold for long against whatever had broken in. The basement was partially finished. James had been converting half of it into a rec room for the kids. Tools lined one wall, and an old sofa sat facing a small television. Sarah helped James onto the couch while the children huddled together, terror etched on their faces. "There's another way out," James said through gritted teeth, gesturing toward a small window near the ceiling. "Sarah, you need to get the kids out. Take them through the window, run to the car." "We're not leaving you," Sarah insisted, pressing fresh towels against his wounds. "You have to," James argued, his voice stronger now despite his injuries. "I'll distract it." Sarah was about to protest when a sudden change came over James. His body stiffened, his eyes widening in pain rather than from his wounds. "James?" Sarah touched his face, alarmed by the heat radiating from his skin. "You are burning up." James convulsed suddenly, a cry of agony tearing from his throat. The children backed away as their father writhed on the couch, his hands clawing at his chest. "Dad!" Tyler's voice quavered. James's eyes flew open, and Sarah gasped. The warm brown eyes she knew so well were now umber, gleaming in the dim basement light. His pupils had changed, elongated, animal-like. "Get away!" James groaned, his voice deepening, roughening. Something's happening. Above them, the basement door splintered as something heavy slammed against it. Sarah grabbed the children, pulling them toward the small window that offered their only escape. Emma looked back at her father, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she cried. James convulsed again, more violently this time. The wounds on his chest had stopped bleeding, the edges of the gashes pulling together with unnatural speed. Dark hair, thicker and coarser than his normal body hair, began sprouting from the healing wounds, spreading across his chest. "Go," he roared, his voice barely recognizable. His face contorted in agony as bones beneath the skin began to shift and reform. Sarah lifted Tyler to the window. The boy was small enough to squeeze through easily. "Run to the barn and hide," she instructed. "Emma will be right behind you." As Tyler disappeared through the window, the basement door finally gave way. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs, but Sarah's attention was fixed on James. Her husband's body was changing before her eyes, limbs elongating, facial features shifting, teeth extending into fangs. "James," she whispered, horrified understanding dawning. "It bit you." James looked at her one last time, a flash of recognition and love in his increasingly inhuman eyes. "Run," he managed to say, his voice a guttural growl. Then his humanity slipped away entirely as the transformation accelerated. Sarah turned to help Emma through the window, but froze as she saw what stood at the bottom of the basement stairs. The creature from outside, the first Wolfman, watched them with predatory focus. It was injured where Sarah had shot it, dark blood matting its fur, but still terrifyingly powerful. Trapped between two monsters, one a stranger, one her husband, Sarah made her choice. She grabbed a hammer from James's tool bench and positioned herself between the creatures and her daughter. "Get out, Emma," she ordered, her voice steady despite her terror. "Nah." Emma scrambled through the window, casting one last tearful glance at what had been her father before disappearing into the night. Sarah stood alone in the basement, hammer raised as she faced the two wolfmen. The creature from the woods growled, taking a step toward her. To Sarah's surprise, James, or what had been James, moved between them, his transformation nearly complete. He stood taller now, his body covered in dark fur, face elongated into a wolf-like muzzle, but his eyes, those umber eyes, held something Sarah recognized. A snarl ripped from James's throat as he faced the other creature. The intruder responded in kind, and Sarah realized, with horror and hope, that James was challenging it. With speeds Sarah's eyes could barely follow, the two beasts crashed together in the center of the basement. Claws slashed, teeth snapped, inhuman howls filled the confined space. Sarah backed toward the window, her escape route, but couldn't bring herself to leave. Somewhere inside that transformed body was her husband, fighting not just for dominance but to protect her. The battle was brutal and swift. James, despite his newly transformed state, fought with desperate fury. The other creature, already wounded from the shotgun blast, began to falter. With a final lunge, James tore into the intruder's throat. The creature collapsed, dark blood pooling on the basement floor. James stood over his fallen enemy, chest heaving, muzzle dripping with blood. Slowly, he turned toward Sarah. She pressed herself against the wall, hammer still clutched in her trembling hand. "James," she whispered. "James, it's me. It's Sarah." The wolfman tilted his head, studying her. Recognition flickered in those umber eyes, followed by what Sarah could only describe as anguish. A whine, almost human in its grief, escaped him. "I know you're in there," Sarah continued, lowering the hammer. "You protected me. You are still protecting us." James took a hesitant step toward her, clawed hands flexing. Sarah fought her instinct to flee, standing her ground as her transformed husband approached. When he was just a foot away, he stopped, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. Sarah slowly, carefully, reached out a hand. James flinched but didn't retreat. When her fingers touched the fur of his face, a shudder ran through his massive frame. "We'll figure this out," she promised, tears streaming down her face. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." Outside, the children huddled in the hayloft of the barn, watching the house through a small window. They had no way of knowing what transpired in the basement, whether their parents were alive or dead. Tyler clung to his sister, sobbing quietly against her shoulder. "What happened to Dad?" he whispered. Emma had no answer that made sense. She had seen her father changing into something impossible, something out of horror movies and nightmares. Yet she had also seen the recognition in his eyes before she fled, the desperate love that remained even as his humanity slipped away. "I don't know," she finally answered. "But Mom will help him. She always does." The night stretched endlessly on. At some point, Emma noticed movement near the house, a large figure emerging from the basement window, followed by a smaller one. In the moonlight, she could make out her mother walking slowly across the yard, and beside her, something that walked like a man but wasn't, something with her father's height but an animal's gait. They were heading toward the forest. Emma considered calling out but stopped herself. instinct told her that her mother had made a choice, a terrible, necessary choice. Perhaps to protect them, perhaps to protect others from what her father had become. As dawn approached, Emma made her own choice. She would wait until full light, then take Tyler to the road, flag down a passing car. They would tell a story about an animal attack, about their parents going missing while searching for help. It wouldn't be the whole truth, but how could the whole truth be believed? And as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, Emma wondered if her father would ever return to them, or if the wolfman that now walked the forest would remain forever wild, with only the faintest memory of the family he had once loved. 1 month later, Emma stood at the edge of the forest behind their repaired farmhouse. The authorities had found the body of a drifter in their basement, a man with a history of violent crime, officially declared the attacker. The strange wounds, the descriptions of an animal-like man, were attributed to the trauma and imagination of children who had witnessed something horrible. Their mother had returned 3 days after that night, claiming to have been lost in the woods after the attack. Of their father, there was no sign. Search parties combed the forest but found nothing. James Harmon was officially missing, presumed dead, another victim of the mysterious drifter. Only the family knew different. Emma watched the full moon rise above the trees, casting silver light across the property. Behind her, the farmhouse windows were dark. Tyler was asleep, and their mother had retreated to her room as she did every night now, unwilling to speak of what had happened, of where she had gone with the creature her husband had become. A howl echoed from deep within the forest, lonely, haunting, familiar. Emma felt goosebumps arise on her arms, not from fear but from recognition. Another howl answered the first, this one closer to the farmhouse. Emma took a step toward the tree line, then stopped. Her mother's instructions had been clear: stay inside during the full moon, keep the doors locked, the windows shuttered. But Emma knew the creatures that prowled the forest weren't coming to harm them. Two pairs of umber eyes gleamed from between the trees, watching her. One pair belonged to a massive wolfman, her father, or what remained of him. The other, smaller but no less feral, she recognized too. Her mother hadn't been the same since returning from the forest. Each night, she grew more distant, more attuned to sounds Emma couldn't hear, scents she couldn't detect. The transformation had been gradual, but Emma had seen the signs, the heightened senses, the changed appetite, the way her mother stared at the moon. Whatever had happened in those 3 days in the forest, her mother had made a choice to join her husband rather than lose him. And now, once a month under the full moon, they returned not to reclaim their human lives, but perhaps to remember them, to watch over the children they had left behind. Emma raised her hand in silent greeting to the creatures that had once been her parents. The larger wolfman lifted his muzzle, another howl rising from his throat, not a sound of hunger or aggression, but something that might have been love, might have been regret, translated into the only language he now possessed. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they were gone, melting back into the forest that was now their home. Emma turned back to the farmhouse, to her sleeping brother who still believed their parents would someday return as they had been. She envied his innocence, even as she accepted the truth. The family that had lived in this house was gone forever, transformed into something wild and unknowable. But on full moon nights, they were still watched over, still protected by creatures that remembered enough of their humanity to keep their children safe, even if they could never be a family again. In the distance, twin house rose toward the moon, united, primal, and somehow, despite everything, still filled with love.